Is that a Picasso or a Moreau behind you? Or neither?
It's one of my children's artwork. He was in high school when he did it. It's a copy of something that was in a magazine. I don't know who the original artist.
But not the Banksy on the left, right?
Yeah. That's because I've reused the youngest child's bedroom as an office, and I've not taken all of the artwork down off the walls yet, including the Banksy and the Lady Monroe thing. So, but I have my flag. Can you see it? It's like right there.
So Greg, you have your audio? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Oh, I'm talking on mute. That's not very helpful. I was asking you, Greg, if you had the link to the notes page. And then I was asking you if you were still there because you weren't moving and responding to me, but that's because I was muted.
I do have the
link in the chat. It's the same one that Meet Echo generated, the same link.
Thank you, Drew. Yep.
Oh, perfect. That's what I was looking for. All right. So we didn't actually just, I guess I'll just go forward. So this, Greg and Drew and I realized that we sort of dropped the ball on getting this organized. So this will be a pretty straightforward meeting. The agenda is at that link. And is there any bashing of the agenda? No? Okay. The first thing on the agenda is a quick activities update. We don't have any of the guides people here, and we don't have Michelle here, so we can skip the newcomers unless Jay or Greg has something specific you want to report on. Okay.
Regarding the newcomers or the new participants program?
Regarding the new participants, yes. Okay.
No.
I can say a few things about outreach.
Okay, go ahead.
So we had an outreach for open source summit that Dave Taylor did, talking about IETF tools. So I think that was pretty good. And I've updated that in our outreach wiki as well. So the folks who are interested can check that out. I got also a request to speak at APIGA, which is the Asian Pacific Internet Governance thing. I've been doing that in a couple of times. Usually they have folks from ICANN and APNEC and other folks as well. So it's good to get IETF represented. So they have asked me. This is going to be in July. And this, like, some folks go and attend in person. I'm going to be remote. So just wanted to keep people updated that's the two updates related to outreach. And if there is anything specific with respect to Vancouver that's happening that folks are aware and something that we need to discuss, we can talk about it. I'm not aware of anything.
I can follow up on that real quickly, Drew. I just spoke earlier today to someone who was at the IGF session in Kyoto, and they're possibly interested in getting. They're from the distributed web (DWeb) community, and they're possibly interested in getting some activities together to around IETF 120, but there's nothing determined or settled there yet. But I think it's just a point that the work that you're doing in terms of coordinating outreach at different activities by the IAB and other folks actually garners some results. So that's great.
Do you know what kind of activity they would be planning?
No,
Okay.
they were just trying to figure out how do they get involved in the IETF. They had no experience with the IETF before, so just talk them through what a usual week looks like at IETF meeting.
Okay, so they reached out to you by email or something?
Yes, yeah. They connected through Mark Nottingham.
I see. Okay.
The only question I have, Dervs, does it make sense to occasionally I know you're updating the wiki, but is it possible to just send really quick notes to the email list that says, oh, this happens, but more details go there? I think that would really help people understand what we're doing or what you are doing.
I think that's a good idea. Like, we are not using our mailing list enough. So I think,
No.
I can do that.
Yeah. Greg, did you have anything to say about the LLC comms stuff? I remember at one point we talked about it. I wasn't sure if it was supposed to be part of these updates or not.
No, just a pitch for, we have the LC Comms monthly update meeting that is modeled on the tools team meeting and very much operationally focused, complementing EODIR. And you will see announcements about that on the IETF announce list and admin discuss. The one for May should be scheduled in the next 24 hours or so, usually 2 weeks. So I think it's the end of May.
Okay.
Just to be explicit about it, they're totally open to anybody who wants to come. So they're just like the tools team meetings. Just show up, and you don't need to be a communicator, just a community member.
The next thing on the update list is working group chairs forum. There's generally not much update on that, but the one thing I did want to mention is Braun, coming out of the last meeting, offered to do a talk on his personal experiences with managing a working group at the next working group chairs forum. So that is one potential tutorial topic that we have. And he was an active participant in the training sessions that were done a couple of years ago. So I think he's very interested in providing leadership to that. So any other updates? Sorry,
I'm just trying to take notes. Is Bron Gondwana, you said?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I just said Braun, so I wouldn't have to butcher his last name. So any other updates that people want to provide? Paul, you don't have any updates on the guides program, right? No. Okay. I'm assuming at some point soon we will start our planning sessions for the new participants. There's usually 2 or 3, and Michelle puts together a planning document. And so that would be coming up at some point. I haven't checked with Michelle to see when those are starting yet. So
I did have a question about whether the additional sort of disclaimer for the newcomer participation, what the process was. Like, I understood there was some incident that sort of triggered doing this, but I felt that they might be very legally formed and might actually be an incentive for people not to become a mentor, because they were like, well, this is a legal responsibility now.
I think that's understood, Paul, and they're going to be rewritten. I think that was just they've just been through a couple of rounds and needed some more feedback on it. So they'll be made more conversational, less legalese.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
All right. Anything else on updates? No, the next topic then is IETF surveys. Hand it to Greg and or Jay.
Yeah, I'll kick it off and invite Jay, of course, to jump in whenever he'd like. I know he's just returned from travel, so I'm glad to see he was here. The idea behind this item was just to give a quick update, like a review of the various survey activities that we have going on, because I think there are a lot happening, and people sometimes may lose track of them, but they're quite interesting in that I think that they provide data behind. They help provide data for decisions and taking action in a way that wasn't maybe previously available. So, of course, the first one there is to talk about is the community survey, the IETF community survey. So this is a all of IETF community. So basically anybody subscribed to an IETF mailing list. And I'm not going to dig into it too deeply because Jay is here and knows this inside and out way better than I do. I'm just going to post a link into the notes and maybe into the chat too. There's a blog post that you can read that links to a much longer report. Just talking about. I'm going to read the top level, but only as a way to pique your interest to go read more. The key findings that were pulled out of this is this survey is that the IETF is good at delivering its mission, but could be better. The IETF is considered very important organization that outperforms its peers in all respects. So this is, I think, maybe surprising to folks that this is actually the way the IETF perceived, but it's good to actually keep in mind, I think. Participation is driven by personal interests or specific technology. And that is actually nice or interesting because it kind of aligns with the ideal model of how the IETF is supposed to work. There's still a problem with gender diversity, but there are some signs of improvement. Again, we have now data to sort of underpin that statement. I encourage you to go look at it. Participation is dominated by people from just 2 regions. Again, probably not surprising to people who track this stuff. Most interesting for this group is probably there is related to participation in the community. There are three things to say about that. There is a problem with behavior, but it's hard to pin down. Again, I encourage you to go read the blog post and the full report for more info. New participants actually need to learn a lot to be effective. No surprise to the people here, but it's still an issue. So it just means that you can be assured that the work that we're looking at here in EODIR is actually relevant and important. There's a lot to unpick about that particular statement. Again, the survey provides more detail about that. And my favorite is the last one that Jay put down in the blog post, which is that email is still universally preferred. And I think Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, that's true. There's a preference for email even among people who are younger that participate in the IETF, which seems surprising that not everything is on TikTok and GitHub, but it does seem like email, working through email is still preferred. So that's my very short and doesn't do it justice summary of the blog post. Go read that. Go read the final report too. And I'll stop there in case Jay wants to add anything in particular.
I'll just add something on the last point, the email point, that what I think is quite clear from the data is that younger people are happy with all sorts of different ways of communicating. They use different methods for different purposes, for different reasons. And generally for speaking to, the adult population, they're very happy to use email because they know that's the only way that we can communicate. So there's no concern there. They also like instant messaging. They also like Slack. They also like GitHub issue trackers and all those kind of things. They're simply just use the tool as necessary rather than sort of have a preference one way or the other.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? So you asked about preferences. I'm curious if you asked about, in any way, if you got it like the functionality. I mean, because to me, that how I wish to communicate with people is different than I need to catch up on a topic. Where do I go to get all of the relevant conversation on that topic? And that's what kind of, when you said, I know you were kidding about TikTok, but I was like, oh my God, can you imagine trying to, decode comments on TikTok? So that's the thing that I was curious about, is that there's different types of tasks and what type of communication is best for a task.
So we didn't go into that. I mean, we've started asking about issue trackers and what people think of issue trackers, and they're rising in people's usage, but no, we haven't. I do think that one of the things, as an aside, that Greg and I are working on is a draft of a how to be effective in the IETF, and that is trying to explain to people that there is a way of using email that is particularly effective, which is threading and bottom posting inside, threaded inside the email, and that this is not a religion. This is not something called netiquette. This is trying to achieve a very specific outcome of readability and the ability to track a specific issue. And so I think I can see that. Yes, I think there is a broad. This is actually only a proxy for something a bit different, but quite how we go about asking what you're suggesting, I don't know. But it is worthwhile considering, though, definitely. Karen.
Yeah. No, that was the specific issue I was currently thinking of. A set of new authors who've never gone through the IESG process, and the basic thing of you need to reply all and make sure all of the relevant mailing lists are copied, because I couldn't tell whether he was answering just just to the individual. I couldn't tell whether he was responding to comments or not, because I wasn't sure he was replying all. It never occurred to me that was something, that, like, how do you figure out whether this conversation is closed or not when it's on email? Anyway, yeah.
Any other questions on that?
Else?
Yeah, I just wanted to, if there aren't any other questions on the community survey, again, go read the blog post, go read the final report. Worth your investment of time, I think, if you're looking to understand the space. The other thing I wanted to mention explicitly here is the new experimental survey. Well, it's a survey, but it's an experiment because we've never done it before, where we're trying to, we are surveying people who didn't return for the following IETF meeting. So we're asking people who attended IETF 118, but did not participate in 119, either remotely or in person. Their reasons for not continuing to participate at IETF meetings. And the idea here is that if there are particular barriers or particular parts of their experience about being at an IETF meeting that we can address to encourage continued participation, this will help us understand that. I think we need to look at this as an experiment because for a number of reasons. The first is we're really just learning exactly how to do this process. So the first lift of this was a little bit heavier than I think we thought. But like with everything else, once we have a pattern established, then we can work to improve it and make it easier and simpler. And of course, the other obvious reason that this is most likely very experimental is that Brisbane 118 was a star location, so outside the usual pattern of meeting locations, and that that probably affected the fact that people who went to 118 didn't then end up going to 119. So anyway, so that's, I think it's close to being completed or closed anyway, and then we'll have to do some analysis about the results. But I just wanted to let folks know that that is in progress.
Greg, one clarifying question. You send this only to folks who did not even register remote this time. So we are specifically targeting folks who dropped out of the attending IETF at all. And what
That's
was the number? Just so that we a rough idea of how many people that you kind of asked this question, just to we get a rough figure.
Oh, I have forgotten that number. Jay probably knows.
It was several hundred.
Okay, so that's a pretty great number.
I think it might have been 800 actually. But there are some real oddities in the answers and stuff that's coming back that makes me think that there may have been a problem with the data or something. People writing to me saying yes, I did come, or other things, and I think that this is because people use different email addresses at different times. So getting the same person is an issue, and I think that perhaps some of the people that sign up to remote and perhaps use a fee waiver are not real people. They're something else. So when you contact them, it triggers an avalanche of weird emails to you as well. So I'm trying to understand this, a little bit as well. It's been an unusual survey, this one.
But you plan to continue to do this for a couple of more cycles and maybe then announce some results once we.
Well, it is an experiment, so we do plan to consider it again. But Greg and I haven't spoken about this, but I'm coming personally I want to have a conversation with Greg and Michelle, who's part of this, as to whether or not we're a little bit premature and we ought to wait for people not to have come for a year before we go and ask them, why haven't you been back for a year, to understand that a bit better, because there are people who only come to certain regions, where the cost of travel is certain something, or it's perhaps just too soon to get an answer from them. So that's I'm just thinking that through basically, but we need to have those conversations. As we're on surveys, can I just provide some other updates on surveys? So this year I'm developing a survey for the IESG about working group chairs and stuff, following up from the discussion at Working Group Chairs Forum. I haven't done anything on that yet. There is a possibility the IESG is going to do some form of survey to help them understand about the number of IETF participants that will be coming to a China meeting. So they're looking at that. And it's about 3 years since we last did a survey of ID authors to understand the tools that authors use and all those kind of things. So considering doing one of those again this year. So I don't want to make the year too heavy, survey wise, because people only have a certain tolerance for it unless we offer, like free cookies or something like that. But we're going to aim for, so we've got some in the pipeline as well later this year.
Okay. Anything else on surveys? All right, so the next subject is tutorials at the IETF. I have put a link in the notes. Let me stick it in the meeting chat. See if I got the right one. Yeah, this is just internal notes for me at this stage. The question has been around the edges about, is there a way to start or restart some of the technical tutorial type topics that we had done? And it's sort of a fuzzy line between technical topics and others. And so this document is just me organizing my thoughts. The tiny proposal is down at the bottom, but I started with, because the expectation is we would develop something like this and then possibly send it to the ISG. So I wanted some of the relevant context at the beginning, which includes defining the EODIR audiences, which we defined a few years back, and I don't think that's changed. And most of the work on a potential and new IETF participant tutorial type material comes through the newcomers activities, and then the stuff for the IETF leadership comes through the LLC, IESG, and some of the training that they're doing. So I was looking at what kind of training are we providing to current IETF participants. And obviously somebody can be in multiple categories here. It's not like you fit into one slot and not the other, but it's just a way to organize your thoughts around what you're trying to do. And so I went down and sort of organized in my head the types of tutorials that we've had. And then the question that I wanted to explore first with you all, and then potentially the next step would be to get some feedback from maybe working group chairs, is what what types of tutorials might we be interested in trying to facilitate. And I'm kind of narrowed this down to like community-driven, technical and tools tutorials. So as opposed to saying what I'm looking to do is to create the opportunity for folks to come in and give tutorials that might be of interest in general, but without us doing, I don't want to say doing all the work, but as when Greg and Derv and I were discussing this previously, there was a lot of discussion around, wasn't it a lot of work to corral all of these tutorials? And there's a part of me that's like, well, I don't know if we want to rebuild that infrastructure, maybe it's more like if there's people that are interested in doing these things, we give them a framework that they can then step up and volunteer if they want to, and then just try it for a year or two and see if people actually make use of it. And if not, then we're not trying to push a ball up a hill kind of thing. So I think there will still be, there's a lot of topics that are still driven, from the leadership or, from the, like one example that comes to mind, I know Jay, we've talked about it before, is the IPR type training, lawyer type training for the working group chairs. So that's not the kind of thing I'm talking about here. I'm talking about more like, we have wikis to describe, how to use data tracker for various things. Is there a data tracker tutorial that might make sense, that might be an overlap between current IETF participants and newcomers? So that's one possibility. Is there a new working group that's developing something that's not that familiar to the IETF? That's another type of tutorial that might be useful. Or, is the IEEE doing something that they would really like the IETF to know more about? So this is just this is like the beginnings of a draft framework. Down at the bottom, it says proposal. Proposal sounds like I'm heavily invested in this, which I'm not. I just am curious about if there's ways we can do something like this. So the idea is, community-driven technical tutorials to be as lightweight as possible on IETF resources, including leadership, and a process that allows people to volunteer to provide these tutorials, and then sort of a clear list of steps that they would need to follow in order to offer one at the IETF. And so, one example of how you might do this would be with some sort of a request form, not a lot different than like the BOF request form now, but something like POCs for the tutorial, title, abstract, interested areas and audiences, like the time and space required. And then, EODIR LLC IESG provides, a POC for facilitating the tutorial. So that's somebody who's kind of responsible for it from the organization side. In this case, it wouldn't need to be somebody from the IESG. It would probably be somebody from EODIR or somebody, like in the case of a working group, maybe the working group chair might be the POC for facilitating the tutorial, and a couple, key drivers of the technology might be the people developing the tutorial. And, physical or virtual space, a Sunday time slot or another time slot or an interim meeting type of opportunity. I didn't delve, the minute I started thinking about, like a virtual meeting, well, then it's a question of, well, how does it get on the calendar? Do we want it on the calendar or not? And I was like, oh, that just sent me down into a deep rat hole I didn't really want to go into. Maybe the IETF would also provide, some sort of meeting technology like MeetEcho, Zoom, WebEx. And then the process for the tutorials is the PCs would submit the form, the EODIR would provide a quick review and assign a facilitator. The POCs would develop the tutorial. I had a question on, do we need a review process or not? Maybe not. When we used to do technical tutorials at the IETF, that we did have a review process. It sometimes was more effective than not. And then the EODIR Secretariat coordinate on the resourcing required to do it. So at one point, I don't know, several months ago, I thought, well, it makes sense. We've come through the pandemic. Maybe we do want to start doing tutorials. I had a couple people ask for various things. But there never seemed to be the energy behind it to do it. And then I thought it was sort of a no-brainer. It just was going to require energy. And then I was talking to some people and they were like, well, no, I don't think the leadership wants to do this. And so I think we need to clarify our thoughts and then make sure that the leadership and the LLC or whoever needs to provide whatever resources are to do it are on board. So how do we effectively start the conversation? I know that several times I've asked in front of working group chairs, do we want to do, we want to do tutorials again? And people are like, oh yes, we need to do all of these tutorials. It always seems like people say we need it, but nobody steps forward to do it. So that's what this note is about, and trying to get to a point of deciding whether we want to do this or not and how we're going to do it. The immediate ones, like, it seems kind of silly, but I know it, to some extent silly. I guess silly is not the right one, but, MeetEcho is a really good example. There's a lot of documentation there on MeetEcho, but we still struggle to use it. And the barrier is a little bit higher for new participants than others. The other thing was we had started down the path. Maria was doing a lot of the work on this, of doing like, here's the 6 steps you need to do this specific task in Data Tracker. And so I would really love sort of some discussion or feedback before we go any further on this. So it looks like we have people in the queue, so that's a start. Go ahead, Jay.
So the without commenting on whether it's a good idea or not, because I generally don't know, you asked about resources, and I'd say the one most difficult resource here is time, because the meeting agenda is already stuffed to the gills, and we have conflicts and difficulty deconflicting that. We have concerns about side meetings and other things. So just finding the time when these things might take place is the problem. So I would suggest that if that's something that perhaps needs some sort of plan associated with it. And I don't know, I'm sorry to just throw something out without having an answer, but I think that's probably just one of the most immediate concerns I can see.
No, that's definitely a concern. And and that's what led me to think, well, we're doing lots of virtual interims now. Maybe we could do them as interims, and then it sort of sent me down a different rat hole. So, but anyway, Maria.
Yeah, so I think for me the question is like why you want to do it, like what's the thing you want to achieve with it, because the way I understood tutorials as they used to be on the Sunday was kind of, and maybe it didn't fulfill this goal always, but I think the thing behind was this is like interesting stuff you might want to know in order to be well prepared for the IETF week. And in that sense, we had like these tutorials about area overviews. I think those were usually well received. And there it was really benefit to have it like just like on Sunday when the week started, and it was also a benefit to have it in person so people can actually also ask questions if they have something like that. The other kind of tutorials that would go in the same category is maybe giving an overview about technology that is in a certain stage of development. So something that is like, it's not like the brand new working group, which has like the first meeting, because that's usually where you don't know what the working group is doing, but it has something where like people, you can still catch up people on like what's done in the working group to an extent that they could actually go to the working group and understand what's going on, which is also like sometimes working groups that exist for a long time, they are so much into the weeds that it doesn't make sense anymore kind of. So that would be kind of the useful kind of tutorials to do if the idea is to like provide useful information to people who want to participate in meeting and are already there in person. The other thing that could be a goal is just like kind of promoting our technology, saying, and this is more useful for technology that's already kind of mostly done, saying this is like really nice piece of technology that you should understand. This is maybe a little bit also like how I would understand the technology deep dives. And like my original understanding of the technology deep dive was also that we focus on technology which is not necessarily IETF technology, but like other technology the IETF community would be interested in, and then also invite external experts. If that is kind of the goal, just promoting our technology or providing like information about our technology in a different way that is more accessible, then maybe we should think about producing some kind of expert videos rather than just doing a not well prepared tutorial, right? And like actually spending money on it and having somebody who knows how to put a video together and have some nice animations or whatever.
Yeah, so I guess I saw the tutorials as fitting into a few categories. I think your first one, like the area overviews, for example, is one that I think is really interesting because people did find them to be very useful. We got good feedback on them. It was really, really hard to get people to do them, and they become stale really quickly. So if you had an area director who had a couple people who were excited about it, then you could get them done.
But that's also, I don't think like for those tutorials which get stale very quickly, it's not like a big value to have. I mean, like everything might be online on YouTube somewhere, but it's not like important to have them as an online resource. It's much more important to have them in person and people can communicate. And I think if you do them on I mean, I know it's hard to get people. I'm still happy to do one on transport again, but if you get them done in a more regular basis, then it's actually not that much work to update them. So if you have like a long-term schedule, maybe that works better.
Yeah, I did the internet area a couple times, and once it's done, it's
just like if you didn't do it for 5 years, then you have to start over with.
Yeah, I think I think the objective was information that helps participants, participate in the IETF and understand the technology of the IETF. So I think it's twofold. But I don't know what the best, I have to admit.
So, I mean, if the focus is on people who are actively supposed to participate in the IETF meeting, I think it is actually valuable to have something in person where you can interact and ask questions and these kind of things.
Right. I know like we did, like when the RFC format was changing, like the XML tutorial and the Markdown tutorials were both very well received. The technical tutorials, for example, Stuart Cheshire did one on service discovery that was really good. It unfortunately came right at the point that we were getting right before the pandemic, and he was planning on evolving it and doing a second version of it. So this is, service discovery is something that, people developing protocols in the IETF need to better understand. And I think he did a really nice job of that.
Yeah, I think we're coming at a really important point here. I think if we do it, we should actually try to plan a little bit more long term. So it's not like we're asking people just like 2 weeks before a meeting, can you do a tutorial? But so they actually know, you do one here and then you do like an update 1 year later and you can already plan for it and you already have it set.
Yeah, well, that's part of why I was looking at some sort of a process or a framework to do this, because then it would be more, it would be better understood what the expectations were and when you could expect it. Greg, I see your comment on the area meetings. They all do have area meetings. They do not provide an overview of the area.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to jump the queue.
No, sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on. We'll just move on. But Mary, you're bringing up a bunch of good points, and it's part of the reason why I'm hesitant to. I'm not sure where to go with this. I just would like to have a conversation about, is there a way to? I think there's an unmet need in the IETF to provide more overview types of information, and I don't know.
So
I don't know the best way to do that anymore.
No, and like as a high level, I think that the Sunday tutorials have been useful, and I would support doing it again. But like as you're trying to do right now, I think we need to organize a little bit more process around it.
Right. Deb.
If originally I was going to talk about tools, but let me start with the area overviews first. If that was well received, then revitalize that and do it again, because it's true that once you have the briefing written, you just do it again and again and again, and maybe you update it, right? I mean, they're only 3 times a year and you do them in person. You might record them and put them online to give somebody ability to see them in between, but having those done in person gives, there's multiple advantages to that, right? It gives somebody to ask, right? Because they know what somebody looks like and they can go ask them during the meeting. Heck, I'd go to that. What the heck does routing do anyway? Other than, anyway. But what I jumped in the queue for is, when you look at the MEDECO documentation, there's videos, there's a little bit of written documentation. The videos are pretty awesome, right? And you can just put them up and leave them up. You need to do the same thing for the data tracker. I have discovered, I had no idea, the data tracker is like a wealth of information and tons of ability to do all kinds of things. Is it written down anywhere to teach anybody how to use the data tracker? I don't know. I just sort of, Roman pointed me at it and said, look at this. And I'm just like, wow. But you could do that once, MEDECO style, right? With a video to show you how to use the data tracker. And then you update it when it moves. But put it online and leave it online and point people to it. Anyway, that's what
Yeah. I think also, I think if you're deeply embedded in using something, then you think it's obvious to everybody, and then you realize, oh, it's really not.
No, I say, how do you register for Mailman 3? What's a username? Where's the wiki? Because the working group chair wiki is not where the rest of the wikis are. There's all kinds of stuff that's not at all obvious, unless you've been doing it for 100 years.
Drew?
Yeah, hi. Just a couple of points. The first was, in the recent time, there was Rasparji that did a tutorial. So we have, in the recent past, 2 IETFs back, where they had a pretty good long tutorial on the new research group wanting to do that. So I think we have sort of but it was again ad hoc. They just talked to the IETF chair approved. And in fact, Greg and we were talking that, why didn't we include this in our topics of interest for newcomers, for instance, since it was more of a tutorial. So in general, I think having sort of a framework for folks to suggest that we want to do tutorial, at least people don't even know, as a new working group, why would anybody even think that this is something that IETF does? Whereas if you look at other conferences, I think tutorials are sort of a part of a track. Of course, we don't want to go all the way, but at least one session in an ITF at a particular time could be dedicated on a Sunday after the IPG, whatever. Like, we have Sunday is getting overloaded, we all know, but somehow if we can still figure out a small slot that this is a tutorial, and then let people suggest, as Karen, I think it's worth trying.
Right. I think, so you just mentioned, just to respond to that, you said Greg was saying that you should have highlighted it in the overview blog post. I think that I knew they were having it, but I knew they had it after the fact, and it would be really nice if we could have done a little bit more education oriented type, you know, here's some of the other tutorials that are happening at the IETF. I don't think it necessarily has to be a Sunday tutorial in the traditional format, but there's a part of me that says we have to start somewhere, and we tend to overanalyze things until.
And my thinking was, I think doing it in person at the IETF meeting might be the most easy. Like, it gives you a target, it gives you a structure, people are there, and people find that, like, they will get a better audience than, like, for instance, our earlier online tutorials, because of time zones, because of this, sometimes have not been. Even on Sunday, we have to try and see whether we get, because we are competing with so many other things now, hackathon, for instance, which was not the case earlier. So let's see how that happens. But I still feel, especially if we target towards newcomers, people who might not be actually going to hackathon, for instance, and pick a topic that might be of interest to those people, who might even show up, like, everybody shows up for instance, our social. So just we pick a slot before the social, or this thing, that more people can come and attend, something that we can of course talk later. But one more thing that I was thinking was, you said that you don't want to talk about IPR and other process thing within this thing. I wanted to understand the reason why.
Oh,
Is there
no.
I don't want to keep the process tutorial?
No, that's not really what I meant. There are tutorials that are driven by leadership requirements or LLC or whatever, and so in my mind,
Okay.
That one is that. So I wouldn't ask for a community person to volunteer to give a tutorial on IPR. I would want it to come through the lawyer and the LLC and the leadership. So that is separate.
But at the same time, like, if talking to newcomers and other people, if we realize that there are a specific tutorial that might be most useful, for instance, like, new people get confused with how our consensus process work, and we have had pretty good tutorial by Pete on talking about consensus. So those things, I think we could still keep it in scope and see, like, some of the things we might already have the material, as in, like, what I mean is that we don't have to do a lot of work. We could just start with some of our best hits from the past, which are still relevant, and see whether we see value in the current structure before we invest too much time and energy in, like, making something big. We can try a low hanging fruit, see how it is received, and then take the next step.
I mean, from a low hanging fruit perspective, I think the tutorial that Spencer and Aaliyah did a number of years ago on bringing new work to the IETF.
Yes.
I mean, that's one that I would love to see revised and presented again, because we keep pointing to it in the new participants activity stuff.
Yeah, so it could be updated with side meeting and things that have changed a little bit. And yeah, so I think, that could be a pretty good topic as well. And final point, in terms of, like, I think area overviews, one more thing which I think we could try is, problem with area reviews is mostly it's expected they will be done by ADs, Sunday, AD time, very tough.
They have historically not been done by ADs.
No. Oh.
The ADs have generally, like, when I did it for Interia, I was not the AD. So it's usually a couple senior level people in the area, but it doesn't have to be an AD.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Another thing which I was thinking in parallel would be maybe asking the reviewers from like SecDR to come and talk, which could be very useful on, like, how do they review and what is their thought process. These are the pitfalls that other people who are writing documents should think about. I think this material already exists in wikis, for instance. So it doesn't have to be like a huge big presentation. It could be those wiki points and discussion. And in our usually in-person tutorial, I think that discussion is what's been the fun part. So we can in fact make that a topic, and asking some key security directorate review, routing that. I think transport security, those could be the key ones. That's just ideas that I was thinking on this conversation, and that's my last comment.
Yeah, there was, I don't know if it was ever done or not. I know there was discussion on, a tutorial on security considerations, how to write them and how are they received. A lot of this is documented, but sometimes it's just a discussion about it. Anyway, I think the point of this, and we could add a section at the bottom of examples of possible tutorials that we could do in the future. That's great. Part of what I was looking at was a framework for how we restart it that doesn't involve that everybody buys into. Like, okay, because we're not talking about tutorials that we're going to ask the LLC to pay for and develop like they did with the working group chair training. So, what are the kinds of things that the community is willing to step up and provide? And different people are passionate about different topics, and some of them will be passionate about, tools, and some of them will be passionate about, their work. Anyway, I'll stop. Deb?
So remember that people learn in different ways too, right? So just because it's written down doesn't mean that people are going to read it, right? So sometimes people would prefer to hear it spoken to them, and sometimes they would prefer to read it, and sometimes they would prefer, not everybody would prefer to actually do it, right? But well, that's my opinion. So just because it's written down someplace doesn't mean it can't be presented and then recorded as a video, and that gives you two options for how you want to ingest that information by reading it in a paper or watching a video. So I do think that's important. Just because it's written down someplace doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it.
Right. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I may have missed it, but what is your next step here on this, Karen?
My next step was to get feedback from you all.
The step after that.
Sorry, I guess that's obvious, isn't it? Sorry. Well, I guess after that, it was to refine this and see if it's clear, and then I don't know. Is it an IESG discussion topic, or do they have plenty of other things, and this would be like down in the noise?
Well, I would say unsolicitedly, and coming back to his point, it seems to me that if you're thinking about doing something during a meeting week, that it comes down to time, and that the ISG controls the agenda for meeting week, so you'd need to talk to them or some subset of them.
Right. So I'm guessing, like, step one, is this a conversation we want to take further? I'm sensing that the answer here is yes. So then step two is, does the concept of a process, a basic framework of people volunteer and we facilitate them make sense? And then step three is this clear enough that I can go to the IESG and say, we're interested in doing this, what do you think? And I don't think it's clear enough yet. I think it's sort of ramblings in my head, but I also would the couple other times I've tried to start this conversation, it's like, well, we could do this. And they're like, oh, well, those are the old Sunday tutorials. We need to do, virtual instead, and we need to do videos. And well, it could actually be a user-driven training tool. And I'm like, you got to start somewhere. And so I'm trying to figure out what is the minimum starting point that we can say it makes sense to move forward or not.
Yeah, I think actually I think the starting point is the old where we left. Like, I think we should revive the Sunday tutorials. And I didn't read the document, or I didn't think about all the points in the document carefully, but I have the feeling you're trying to over-engineer this a little bit. I think we should, as a group, try to brainstorm about topics that are interesting, as we did just now. Like I think a lot of topics came up in this discussion, and then make a plan for the next whatever 3 to 6 meetings and try to find speakers for it. And then just run them as they were, and then try to improve step by step, and like get feedback from people, what they liked, what they didn't like. Of course, we can record them, we can put them online and see if you watch them or not and find them useful, and then we can like just iterate from there. Also, just on the ISG point, like because we did discuss this for the last meeting, maybe 2 weeks ago, at least we talked briefly about the transport tutorial, and I brought this up with the ISG at that point, and there was a bit of discussion about time pressure and like, yeah, Sunday is already overloaded or whatever, but I believe, I mean, maybe you just have to do it again, but I believe, people were open to like, just try it again and see if it's useful.
Okay.
Honestly, I think you just pick 2 topics. Pick the area reviews because that was well received the last time. Pick something that's technology related, bringing new work to the IETF, data track or something, right? Just pick 2 things and do it. Stop thinking about it and just do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, from my experience as a presenter, I think it would actually be useful to like do a little bit more long-term planning, because as I said, like I did the transport overview once and I could have easily done it a second time, but like doing it right now, it's a lot of more effort because I haven't done it for like 5 or 6 years or whatever. So, if I would have known, you have to do it every 5 meetings or whatever, it would be much easier for me actually. Or like you can even try to like have some kind of handover thing, like you do it twice and then the second time you pick a new core, so you always switch one person, so you have some kind of continuity or whatever, I don't know, but like a little bit of long-term planning would probably help.
Okay. So I will, it's 12:56 and we're going to need to wrap. The link is in the notes. If you have any further feedback, that's great. If you want to drop some of the suggestions for future tutorials in the notes, that's fine. And that's right, Vancouver. And we can continue this conversation over email. The last agenda topic was basically suggested topics for further EODIR conversation. We'd had a few of them that came out of our side meeting at the last IETF. And if there's any additional ones, but we have 3 minutes now. So I think if you look at the link for the tutorial document, you can add suggestions at the bottom of that. And if you look at the link for the minutes, you can add suggestions for future EODIR topics, like discussion topics there. Anything else? Is that enough of a way forward, Greg?
I think so. I'll just, I know we have to wrap up in about a minute or so, but just to plug that I think we're still planning to do a Friday morning side meeting following our usual pattern for EODIR during IETF 120. So if folks are either in Vancouver or able to make it to that time zone, you can pencil that in. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.